High-ranking Finks Bikie Troy Fornaciari has pleaded guilty to gun and drug charges at Wollongong local court.
In the brutal theater of the Australian underworld, where reputation is currency and fear is the law, your face is your flag. And no flag was flown more defiantly than that of Troy Albert Fornaciari. This wasn't just a man, he was a walking statement, a human canvas upon which a life of crime, trauma, and outright rebellion was permanently inscribed. But beneath the ink, behind the presidency of the notorious Finks Motorcycle Club, lies a story that is far more human, and therefore, far more tragic. It's a saga that begins with a single, searing childhood trauma, a moment of catastrophic failure that would shatter a boy's trust in the world and set him on a collision course with violence and infamy. This is a chronicle of a meteoric rise and a spectacular fall, of a man who reached the pinnacle of outlaw power, only to be brought down by his own rage, targeted for assassination by his rivals, and saved from a bullet not by police or bodyguards, but by the most mundane of miracles, a broken-down car. Prepare to delve into the definitive story of Troy Fornaciari, a man who so fiercely built an identity as an outlaw that he became its most famous prisoner. Part 1. The scar that came first, the boy before the ink. Before the not guilty cheek, before the tough look, eyelids, there was just a boy named Troy. Born in 1984, his world was not yet defined by clubhouses and silencers. The blueprint for the bikie boss was, in fact, drawn in a moment of profound personal and systemic failure. The pivotal event, as detailed in later psychological reports presented to the courts, was the sudden and fatal heart attack of his father. The family home, a place that should have been safe, was plunged into chaos. A desperate, terrified call was made to emergency services, a plea for help in their most vulnerable hour. But in a failure that is almost unimaginable, that call was allegedly dismissed as a hoax. The sirens never wailed. The ambulance never arrived. For young Troy, this was more than the loss of a parent. It was a foundational lesson about the nature of the world. The very institutions society teaches us to rely on the authorities meant to protect and serve had proven to be not just fallible, but utterly indifferent. This single, scarring event is widely regarded by psychologists as the genesis of his deep-seated, lifelong contempt for authority. It forged a core, unshakable belief. You cannot trust the system. You are truly on your own. Adrift in the wake of this tragedy, his adolescence became a search for structure in a world that had proven itself to be chaotic. In a brief, flickering attempt to find the discipline he so clearly craved, he enlisted in army training. It was a path that could have rerouted his entire destiny. But the rigid, conformist structure of military life was anathema to a spirit already hardening into rebellion. The experiment was short-lived and unsuccessful. By the age of 18, unmoored and disillusioned, he naturally gravitated towards the company of those who lived on the fringes. This was the environment that would become his finishing school. It was a world that celebrated the values already taking root within him. Part 2. The Living Manifesto, Rise of the Finks President. The world of outlaw motorcycle clubs didn't just welcome Troy Fornaciari. It offered him a mirror for his soul. It provided the strict code, the brutal hierarchy, and the sense of brotherhood his fractured life had always lacked. He didn't just join the Finks Motorcycle Club. He absorbed its ethos completely. His raw ambition and a ruthlessness that was becoming second nature acted as jet fuel, propelling him through the ranks at a startling pace. By his early 30s, he had seized the throne, becoming the president of the Finks' powerful South Coast chapter, based in the industrial heartland of Wollongong. This role transformed him from a foot soldier into the chief executive of a sophisticated criminal enterprise. He was now responsible for directing a portfolio that included drug distribution, extortion, and violently enforcing the clubs while across the Illawarra region. But his ascent was marked by something more than just criminal strategy. He embarked on a radical, permanent, and very public transformation of his own body. Observe the evolution. In just 4 years, he transformed from a man who could walk down the street relatively unnoticed into a living, breathing billboard of outlaw ideology. This was a conscious, strategic, and permanent rejection of the mainstream world. It was the ultimate point of no return. His face became a chaotic, confrontational text. Not guilty scrawled across his left cheek, a permanent, public sneer at the justice system that would repeatedly try to cage him. Tough look etched onto his very eyelids, a direct challenge to anyone brave enough to meet his gaze. Misspelled phrases like "in God's hands" on his chin, a grammatically skewed testament to a twisted sense of fate. His forehead, a canvas of elaborate Gothic script and cryptic symbols. According to the Daily Mail article, this transformation was a deliberate act of self-branding. It was his armor, making him instantly recognizable and fearsome. It was also his prison, ensuring he could never hide, never get a regular job, never quietly slip back into a society he so openly despised. He had publicly and permanently burned every bridge to a normal life, branding himself as an outsider forever. Part 3. The King's Gambit: Raids, Regret, and Hollow Promises. The illusion of invincibility, so carefully cultivated, evaporated on the morning of February 1st, 2018. In a precision strike dubbed Operation Redknapp, heavily armed police descended upon the Fink's fortified North Wollongong clubhouse. Inside, they uncovered the stark tools of the club's trade: a loaded .222 caliber rifle fitted with a custom-made silencer, an instrument of assassination, not petty crime ammunition, a stolen Toyota Hilux, and a trove of gang paraphernalia. Troy, then 34, was arrested alongside a younger associate, Jake Smith. The charges were severe, but the most significant was that of directing the activities of a criminal group, a charge that formally acknowledged his status as a kingpin. The case against him was further cemented by a prior incident that perfectly illustrated his volatility and his utter contempt for any authority outside his own. As reported, in August 2017, a Fink's associate named Jacob Ninan crashed a Harley-Davidson motorcycle that Troy had lent him. Troy's response to the injured man was not concern, but pure, unadulterated rage. He arrived at the scene and, in a stunning act of audacity, assaulted Ninan in full view of the attending paramedics. The situation grew so volatile that the emergency medical personnel felt they had no choice but to barricade themselves inside their own ambulance for their own safety. This was the code in its rawest form. Respect for the club's property trumped all, including basic human decency and the rule of law. Cornered by overwhelming evidence, his legal strategy shifted by the time he faced sentencing in May 2019. He pleaded guilty to a reduced suite of charges. And in the courtroom, a new, unexpected Troy Fornaciari seemed to emerge. He was contrite, regretful, and spoke of a desire for reform. He reportedly expressed embarrassment over his tattoos and a wish for a clean start, his lawyers citing psychiatric treatment and medication for providing him with a clearer outlook. The magistrate, while sentencing him to 3 years and 6 months with a non-parole period of 2 years and 6 months, expressed cautious, and as it would turn out, prescient skepticism. The court officially urged him to follow through, to remove the ink and the ideology it represented. For a fleeting moment, the stage was set for a redemption story. But the Underworld is a siren song, and its call would soon prove irresistible. Part 4. The Unraveling, Meth, Mayhem, and a Hospital Siege. By 2022, the promises made under the courtroom's stern gaze had turned to dust. Troy was not only back in the game, he was hurtling into its most destructive and desperate chapters. New and chilling allegations surfaced, detailing a violent kidnapping in the suburb of Lake Heights, where 2 women were allegedly abducted and held over Underworld debts, with Troy accused of using threats and coercion. But the true, undeniable proof of his relapse came from an unexpected police windfall. Detectives from Lake Illawarra, while conducting routine surveillance on a separate drug dealer, found their phone taps leading them to a much bigger fish, Troy Fornaciari. He wasn't a bit player. He was the upline supplier, the source. Over a concentrated and meticulously documented 3-week period in April 2022, Police watched as a staggering 238 grams of methamphetamine with a street value of approximately $56,000 changed hands under his direction. Surveillance was so comprehensive it even captured the mundane frustrations of his trade. Customers complaining about the poor quality of his ice and his unreliable service. This wasn't the operation of a sleek criminal mastermind. It was the sign of a desperate, chaotic, and crumbling enterprise. And this drug trade was enforced with terrifying, brazen violence. On May 13, 2022, in the suburb of Dapto, Troy and his 21-year-old associate, Kai Epps, tracked down a fellow drug dealer, Paul McKinnon. The motive was a $65,000 debt. The assault was brutal, leaving McKinnon with a significant head wound that required immediate hospital treatment. But the message wasn't just physical violence. In an act of pure psychological warfare, Troy later showed up at the Wollongong hospital where McKinnon was being treated. He lingered menacingly in the car park, directing further threats towards McKinnon's friends and family who were present. This was a calculated demonstration that there was no sanctuary, not even within the walls of a hospital. There was nowhere to hide from his reach. His arrest days later at a Liverpool apartment was a foregone conclusion. The charges were his most severe yet: commercial drug supply, wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, and intimidation. Bail was, of course, refused. The man who had promised the court a new life was now facing his old one from behind bars. Part 5: The Dodged Bullet, a conspiracy foiled by fate. But as Troy sat in a cell in 2023, a bombshell revelation emerged. One that reframed his entire story and highlighted just how thin the line between life and death can be in the world he inhabited. It was revealed that at the very zenith of his power in early 2018, he had been a dead man walking. Damien Featherstone, a ruthless rival and leader of a resurgent Brothers for Life gang in the Illawarra, had orchestrated a detailed and cold-blooded plot to assassinate him. Intercepted phone calls, which would become the cornerstone of the case, captured Featherstone mocking Troy and instructing his lieutenants, including Andrew Coe, to source firearms. Their plan was cunning: lure Troy out of his fortified clubhouse under the false pretense of buying a gold ring and ambush him in the heart of the Wollongong CBD. In late January 2018, the plan was activated. The hit squad, armed and prepared for a public execution, set out on their mission. But then, fate intervened with a twist so mundane it was almost comical. The car they were driving suffered a sudden mechanical failure. It broke down, stranding the would-be assassins and aborting the mission in its tracks. They fully intended to regroup and try again. But the clock had run out. Just days later, the very same police raid that landed Troy in jail on firearm charges, Operation Red App, swept him off the streets and into, ironically, protective custody. He had told police during that arrest that he believed Brothers for Life wanted him dead. His intuition was terrifyingly accurate. He was saved not by his own cunning or strength, but by a faulty alternator or a dead battery. The rival conspirators were eventually rounded up, their plot a stark testament to the random, chaotic nature of fate in the underworld. Part 6: The Final Sentence, a legacy of ink and incarceration. With the specter of the failed hit now a permanent part of his dark legend, Troy's immediate fate was finally sealed in March 2024. After pleading guilty, he was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison for the commercial drug supply and the brutal wounding of Paul McKinnon. With time already served, he became eligible for parole in June 2025. And so, Troy Fornaciari finds himself once again at the same crossroads. The heartfelt promises of 2019 were proven to be hollow, performative gestures. The tattoos, which he once claimed he was embarrassed by and wanted removed, remain. They are a permanent record of a life he claimed to want to leave behind, but ultimately could not. The question is no longer about the crimes he has committed. The ledger on that is full. The question now is about the man he might still become. Can a persona so violently and publicly constructed ever be deconstructed? Or is he forever a prisoner of the identity he so indelibly inked onto his own skin? His story is a brutal, real-world lesson in the inescapable cycles of crime and the enduring, poisonous legacy of childhood trauma. It is a tale without a clear ending, leaving us all to watch and wonder what the final chapter will hold. Conclusion. Troy Fornaciari's life stands as a stark, unsettling reminder of how a single, catastrophic moment can send ripples across a lifetime, irrevocably twisting a path toward violence and notoriety. It forces us to ponder the immense weight of our past and the fragile, complex possibility of breaking free from it. The gavel has fallen in his case, but the judgment on his legacy is yours to make. Where does our understanding of his trauma end and the demand for his accountability begin? Is there a key that can unlock his self-made prison? If you're captivated by these intricate, often dark explorations of the human condition at its most extreme, then we invite you to join us for the next investigation. Your subscription, your engagement, and your thoughtful perspective are what make this deep dive into the unknown possible. Thank you for your time and your curiosity. Stay vigilant.